The biggest insult is losing a wrestling match to your own finisher. When a wrestler does this, it's meant by shock and awe by the announce team as they decry this foul decision, even though really it's just putting over that maneuver. If it's so good it puts everybody out regardless, then it must be pretty damn good. Even though, yes, with that logic, why wouldn't all the guys and girls do it? Let's just stop thinking about it. This is when wrestling starts to break. Throughout the years, many people have busted this out on their rival, however, and made it look really good. It's never a bad idea for a spot and gets a reaction, so it makes sense why it's lasted as long as it has. Only one person can be at the top, mind, and today is the day we lay this down forever. I'm Simon from What Culture, and this is 10 wrestlers who perfected a finisher on its owner. Number 10, Brock Lesnar builds SUPLEX City. Way before Brock Lesnar had officially constructed SUPLEX City, he used a German suplex to show off his amateur background and also to show what a beast he was. Before all of this though, there was only one person fans thought of when they saw someone get dropped on the back of their neck, and that was Kurt Angle. This is why in the thick of their 30-minute Iron match on SmackDown in 2003, Angle and Lesnar traded suplexes like the bout would be won on who could do the most in half an hour. Brock even stole Kurt's method of doing 3 in a row, and while he decided not to hold on, he did utterly chuck the Olympic gold medalist miles across the ring, which was beyond impressive. Angle looked like a ragdoll, and it got a bit uncomfortable after a while. It was the first sign that one day Lesnar would become the mayor of this locale, making this night doubly more exciting for him because he withstood Kurt's ankle lock during the last few seconds to win the championship. Few talk about that today, however, because we're too busy moaning about how many Germans Brock does. I would just say he made it his own. And yes, I know that sounded weird out of context. Number 9, Rey Mysterio's Twist of Fate. Happening all the way back in 2003 on an episode of SmackDown, the small aside is that during this period, WWE really could have pulled the trigger on this style of wrestling and probably done quite well with it. And we all know how that went, and a 15-minute treat here was no closer to changing that. Shannon Moore and Crash Holly tried to get involved in order to help Hardy, which did lead to Matt focusing on Rey's hamstring and rendering it useless. All of a sudden, that 619 finish seemed less and less likely. Version 1 then went to town on this with the hopes of keeping Mysterio down altogether, without thinking what the luchador may have up his sleeve. As it turned out, that was a twist of fate which was delivered arguably better than the one we were used to. Smooth as silk like all of Rey's offense, it made the crowd erupt and tied into how the match was going to end, meaning it was genuinely effective. It wasn't done just for the sake of doing it. Number 8, CM Punk goes old school. It's crazy to think how the Punk Taker WrestleMania 29 feud was built, as well as CM Punk pouring the recent deceased Paul Bearer's fake ashes over the dead man. And yes, that was a real sentence you just heard. He also had Paul Heyman dress up as the Phenom's former manager and mock him. It worked, I suppose, but it wasn't without controversy. This carried on during the match too, where Punk decided he didn't just want to end the Undertaker's streak, but also disrespect him by stealing his mannerisms and doing all of his moves. The one that really irked the crowd, however, was when he went to the top rope and skillfully walked down it before jumping into the air and smashing Taker in the head. He had gone old school. This was treated like Punk had slapped Undertaker's mother right in the face, and while it didn't help him win, it was a major contributor in everybody saying this was the best belt on the night, and arguably Undertaker's last WrestleMania highlight. Number 7, Bayley's Banks statement. If you're a bit of a Bayley or Sasha Banks fan and want to remember when they were at their peak, go back and watch the two tangle at TakeOver Brooklyn. It's not meant as a slight either, it's just a combination of up and down booking on the main roster and the sheer level of quality the pair brought to that 30-minute Iron Man match. There was another scrap before that doesn't get the plaudits it deserves though. Not only is it a great reminder to how good heel Sasha can be, but seeing Bayley learn from her experiences with her great rival to come up with this particular spot rocked. As Banks went for her trademark finish, the hugger had it scouted and reversed it into her own version. It wasn't as technical as Sasha's, but the sheer brutality in how she applied it was more than believable. It was to no one's surprise that it forced Banks to tap out. A head would have come off otherwise. No one talks about this today because we do all focus on the aforementioned classic, but we should. It was not only a cool idea, but it added to Bayley's character. She would do whatever she had to win within the rules, but also had a bit of a darker side to boot. Talk about ticking all those boxes. Number 6, John Cena hits rock bottom. While we all like to crap over John Cena and accuse him of not being able to wrestle, Newsflash, he can. Take his back-to-back WrestleMania matches with The Rock. It's quite clear he was in charge throughout both, and while the first was better than the second, it's not like you couldn't take something away from each. When they did go for the second round as well, the story in play was that despite throwing everything at the Great One, nothing was working. Cena's usual arsenal of moves hadn't got the job done, so he had to do something different. So he chose to just steal the People's Champion's signature and smash him with the rock bottom. It was a proper desperation maneuver too, which helped with the crowd's reaction, and much like other entries in this list, it was more the impact of it as opposed to the execution, but look, it landed with intended results, especially here. The night ended with The Rock raising Cena's hand, who had finally got his revenge and win over the most electrifying man in sports entertainment. Or should I say, all of entertainment. Number 5, Chris Jericho plays Sweet Chin music. Long before their much-praised feud in 2008, Chris Jericho and Shawn Michaels were out to prove a point at WrestleMania 19, and many said they did. Locked in a war to see who was the better wrestler, the two went at it with the veteran getting the better of the younger Y2J, who had shown a tremendous amount of disrespect from bell to bell. The biggest insult came when the bout was drawing to a close and Jericho was on the front foot. Quite literally. Seeing an opportunity to make his mark, Chris warmed up the band like his opponent before booting him right in the face. It looked great as well as Jericho threw all his toes into it, making it seem as if his goal was to knock Shawn's head off. If you were in the Ayatollah of rock and rollers corner, you would even go on to claim this was the better version. Cue that debate in the comments. It wasn't enough to get him the victory, but look, here we are years later and we are talking about it, and there's a reason for that. It was a proper moment and the delivery was excellent. It's the least these two would have wanted. Number 4, Seth Rollins strikes from out of nowhere. Back at Extreme Rules 2015, WWE was having some fun with the rules, all playing fast and loose with them. Seth Rollins had just won his first world title at WrestleMania 31 before finding himself in a feud with Randy Orton. To try and get a surefire winner, they had been locked inside a cage at Extreme Rules, and even though that always comes with a no DQ stipulation, the Viper was still told that if he did use his signature RKO, he would suffer this fate. Welcome to wrestling. It was prime material for Rollins though to heel it up to the clouds. After Orton had fought the desire to use the move and opted for the pedigree instead, because of course, he found himself in quite the predicament when Kane and J&J Security, who had been hanging around outside, got involved. Randy was able to please the crowd by jarring the big red machine with the RKO, but that left the door open for Seth to do the exact same thing. With some excellent timing, he crushed Orton's face into the floor with said RKO, and it was a perfect example in how to be an opportunist. The audience totally bought this could be the finish as well, and it made you hate the former Shield member even more. What an absolute asshole. Number 3, Randy Orton gets Cena to STFU. It's a shame WWE went back to the well one too many times with Randy Orton versus John Cena. I totally get why they pushed it as much as they did because it was their two biggest stars clashing, but by the time we had gotten to match number 67,578, it was hard to care. This was especially true at the 2014 Royal Rumble, where fans just couldn't get into it because of the overkill. We've been here and seen it all before. Orton seemed to sense this, however, so pulled something new out of his pants, namely locking in Cena's own STFU. Now, not only did he apply it far better than the man you can't see, but John sold it like he was dying. It always looked like that, no one would have ever complained, and if the unthinkable had happened and Cena had tapped out, at least it would have been believable. It looked sick. Randy would get the victory here after the Wyatt family distracted Cena, but the real win was the reminder that Orton was born to do this. He took a move we'd seen 1,000 times and made it his own. It was great. Number 2, Shawn Michaels has pedigree. Most people returning to wrestling after an almost career-threatening injury would take it easy, but I guess Shawn Michaels isn't most people. Turned on by former best friend Triple H after a DX reunion was teased, HBK felt like he had a point to prove, so went after the game in the most direct fashion possible. Still seething from being thrown through a car window, as you would, 6 days before their clash at Survivor Series 2002, Michaels ambushed Hunter and hit him with the pedigree. The fans loved it because they were desperate to see Triple H get his, and it was an awesome way to underline that Shawn was back and potentially better than ever. The cool thing about it was, Michaels let go of Trips' arms halfway down, leaving him to crash into the mat on his own steam. It was a small tweak, but it worked and made it feel like Shawn was in complete control. A few months later, Michaels would be winning the world title from his former best friend, and the whole story was a joy. Number 1, Becky Lynch stuns Stone Cold. The most recent of these moves happened in 2019 on an episode of Steve Austin's USA Network fireworks show, and was one of those situations where you throw your hands up in the air and wonder how the hell we got here. Becky Lynch was in booking Limbo the year prior, and now she was the star guest on a Legends program, hitting him with his own maneuver. Throughout, they also engaged in axe throwing, rode some ATVs, and answered questions about Seth Rollins, and by the time they were smashing beers together to celebrate a job well done, it was a pretty good 30 minutes all things considered. But the rattlesnake should have known better. Realizing that social media and GIFs are the ultimate way to promote your brand, Lynch kicked Austin right in the gut and gave him a stunner, much to her own delight. It delivered brilliantly as well. She dropped straight to her ass, only to turn around and stare at her prey, and fair play to Steve for selling it like a champ. That won't have hurt her rise to the top either. One of the best of all time doing the favors. Isn't 2019 just great? Know of any other wrestlers who perfected a finisher on its owner? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Then head over to whatculture.com and read yourself some articles, and follow What Culture on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. My name is Simon from What Culture, and I'll talk to you again soon.